Rhett Reese and Paul Wernick, the screenwriters of Deadpool. It seems like every year we get about 7 or 8 superhero movies. So how do you guys bring something new to this genre?
Well, Deadpool breaks a lot of rules, the comic and the character. And in that, here we are doing a movie that breaks the fourth wall, where the character is aware that he's in a movie, where there's a ton of gore, swearing, strange pop cultural references. I think right away, we're allowed to, and we're even allowed to poke fun at those other 6 or 7 superhero movies from that year. So I think the combination of all those things really makes this feel like an apple among oranges.
And it's the apple among oranges, I feel, that gave the studio reservations and took 5 or 6 years to make this movie, but it's also the apple among the orange that I feel like is the reason the audiences embraced the movie and it became the success really that it did.
Yeah, there's definitely an edginess to it that I think is missing from a lot of other, shall we say, kid-friendly superhero films. This is definitely a superhero film for adults and alternative programming for Valentine's Day, as it was.
10-year-old kids, strangely. It
really became a sticking point for parents. A lot of parents that come and said, "What have you done to me? You've put me in this difficult position where my child's desperate to see this. I don't know what to do." And we have heard from a lot of people who let 11, 12, 10, 11, 12-year-old
My
kids.
son, who was 12 when it came out, he's 13 now, he's 12. And I told him he can't see it till he's 15 years old. And
wasn't gonna fly.
He came home one day, he was crying, and he said, "Dad, all my friends are making fun of me because they're going to see the movie, and I can't go. You won't let me go." And I'm like, "Fuck it, we're going to see the movie." So I swear, I'm sorry. Can I swear, Zach?
Yeah, you can swear. Yeah, there's no MPAA here.
I thought the kids were going to make fun of him for that. They're really going to make fun of him for the fact that you just told them he was crying when he came home.
Yeah.
Someone to answer to.
Yeah, I took him to a screening of the movie, and I covered his eyes just once at the beginning, and I kept my hands there the whole time.
Audiobook version of Deadpool.
So take us through the screenwriting process. Where did you guys start in adapting this into a screenplay?
Well, we interestingly, it was 2009. They came to us. They were trying to Fox was trying to reboot the Wolverine Origins Deadpool introduction. They, admittedly, I think, didn't do the character justice and made some pretty major missteps. One of which they sewed the mouth of the guy who speaks too much. They sewed it shut. They came to us, or at least, we auditioned for the job in 2009 and had never heard of Deadpool. We had, we were comic book guys, but it was a 90s comic and it was a little beyond our time. And so we auditioned for the job. We read the comics and got familiar with the character and the tone and really the texture of the world, and then went into pitch. And we pitched, interestingly, a very traditional superhero movie and did not get the job. We got passed on, and ultimately our agent went to Ryan. Ryan was attached to the project from the very beginning. We've been on it, 7+ years. He's been on it, more than a decade. So our agent reached out to Ryan and said, "Look, I think these are the guys. You should read another script of theirs," and he read a drama we wrote for HBO, a dark drama, and said, "Oh my God, this is the kind of stuff I want to do. I want to get into the pathos of the character. I want to dig deep and really tell a different kind of story, and I think you're my guys." And 2 days later, we were hired by the studio and developed the movie with him, side by side.
So what was the most challenging part for you guys in writing this script? I mean, was there a particular scene, or maybe an arc that you needed to crack? Like, what was the challenge to it for you?
I think the challenge was to figure it out structurally and to balance the two tones. It's a bit of a two-tone movie in that the stuff from the past is pretty dark. I mean, it's cancer, it's a laboratory with a lot of torture. It's the kind of things that will definitely kind of drive an audience into the ground if you leave them in that world too long. Whereas the more recent things after he becomes Deadpool are very light and silly and kind of crazy. And we needed a structure that allowed us to juggle two different tones throughout, as opposed to having the first half of a movie be one tone and the second half be another. And the nonlinear structure is what we came up with as a means of moving seamlessly between present and past, and constantly keeping the audience either downbeat because of what was going on, but then lifting them up in the next sequence. We were able to move back and forth between the two. I think that was probably the greatest challenge.
Yeah, but interestingly, it was the easiest script we've ever written. It was the most fun script we ever wrote. We had the advantage of, Ryan being attached from the very beginning. And so we had his voice in our head, and he spoke to us almost on a daily basis as we sat down at the computer. He spoke to us in our head, meaning you could just kind of hear him saying the words, and it was so much fun to write for us.
Right. I was going to ask you guys about the tone, because I mean, like you said, there's some really dark, violent elements to it, but there's also a lot of comedy in it as well. And then, of course, breaking the fourth wall and all this kind of meta stuff. In regards to, was there ever a moment where you thought, okay, maybe we're going too far with some of this, or we need to pull back a little bit, or
I wouldn't say so. I mean, I think we challenged ourselves to push it as far as we could, and we were our own judges, and we would try things. Sometimes if it went too far, it just ended up on the cutting room floor, but we did at least try it. We had a no censorship policy. One of the things we learned in Zombieland, which we did a few years before Deadpool, was that sometimes you really can go from a very dark moment to a laugh in a hurry. There's a moment where the character of Tallahassee reveals that his son died, was killed by zombies. And within 2 or 3 moments of him revealing that fact, he cracks this joke about the movie Titanic. And we watched as the audience was misty-eyed and then suddenly laughing again. And I think we took away the lesson that you can afford to have both heart and sentiment and darkness and humor, walking arm in arm through the movie.
Mm-hmm. Right, it's a very hard line to balance there, so congratulations on doing that. I wanted to ask you about your collaboration. You guys have worked together on a lot. What is it? What do each of you give each other, if that makes sense, in the writing process?
A shoulder to cry on.
Okay.
I think, again, we don't write together in the same room, interestingly. We break story together, but we go off and break scenes. We go off to our individual desks and write individual scenes, and then trade back and forth and rewrite each other till it melds into one voice. I think, partners, and this is not specific to Red as much as partnerships and writing partnerships, is that we give each other, the ability to, judge each other's work and ourselves before it goes out and into the world. I think you have that first element of quality control when you're writing a script and you're so intimately, in that world, you lose perspective. So it's hard to know when you're sitting down at your computer whether what you just wrote is genius or it's terrible. And I think, the partnership always is that first filter, that first, quality control that allows you to bounce off one another. What specifically Rhett gives me as a partner is just, he's brilliant and funny and
that's very kind. I feel the same way about Paul. So, but it really, I think we bring out the best in each other, and I think we're better each together than we would be alone. And I think that's the key. We really, and it's also, there's a little bit, when you have ideas, and this is, I think, TV writers' rooms benefit from having multiple brains in the room, but oftentimes you'll have a thesis, and then you'll have an antithesis, and then you'll have a synthesis, and the ideas will bounce back and forth, and suddenly you arrive at an idea that's superior to the first idea that was thought of, because you've got that other person bouncing stuff back off you. So it really helps.
Mhm. And in the case of a film like this, there's a lot of action in it. I think we all have this perception of screenwriting as just coming up with snappy dialogue. But in a film like this, there's a lot of big, complex action sequences. So how do you write those out and conceive of them so that they make sense on the page and then can make sense on the screen?
Well, I think we get as specific as we can, and then oftentimes there'll be a second unit director or stunt coordinator and obviously director who come and change things depending on the budget and what's actually practical to try to pull off. But if you look at the 12 bullet scene, for instance, the scene where Deadpool realizes he only has 12 bullets, we very specifically in the screenplay walked through how he used those 12 bullets, who he shot with them, who he missed, when he missed, why he missed, what he said after he missed, and then how he was down to one bullet and he had 3 bad guys still to kill, and he had to align himself perfectly to shoot the one bullet through all 3 of their heads. It was very, very specifically laid out. And then obviously the exigencies of shooting you'll be forced to change certain things, but I think the key to us is being as specific and having as much personality as possible on the page with the action, and
it being character based. The action being character based. It comes from character rather than just spectacle. I think is what we hope to bring.
There are moments where Deadpool shoots a guy who's already down, not because he needs to shoot. And these are key bullets that he can't afford to waste, but he's so impulsive and so angry, he can't help but pump another 2 bullets into a dead guy for having thwarted him. And that's just an example of character personality. How would Wolverine or Superman?
And another example is when he forgets his guns in the 3rd act. That was actually budget inspired. We couldn't afford a big gun fight at the end, so it was budget inspired, but it was also character based. Like, he's a forgetful dude. He's just like us. He left his backpack by the side of the door as he was heading out in a hurry. So again, trying to just mine those character moments and bring them out in the action.
Right, and I think that character is what really drives these films and makes them more than just routine action, right? I mean, what we've seen in the past few years with a lot of these superhero films is that people are going not just to see these big action spectaculars, but to see all these characters that they've grown to love.
Absolutely.
So let's talk a little bit about working with Tim Miller, the director. When he came on board, what did he bring to the script that helped bring it to that next level?
Well, one of the things is Tim is very, very logical and grounded and gritty in the way he approaches a story. So I think he brought a little bit of that logic policing to make sure that the script was airtight. And I think he also brought a certain, he really likes the gritty, just real emotion. And so I think that was something we definitely played to.
And he brought really just an encyclopedic knowledge of the comics. He is absolutely, he's read every single comic I think that's ever been written, not only on Deadpool, but in comic book stores. He really has a knowledge that we didn't entirely have going into the film. He also brings a visual effects background. He owns a visual effects studio, Blur Studios in Culver City. He brings the incredible knowledge base from having built a studio from the ground up, a visual effects studio, that most, if not any director has, his encyclopedic knowledge of the visual effects world and being able to get the most bang for your buck in terms of what he can put on screen versus what.
I mean, it's a $60 million movie that looks like a $100 million movie, and a lot of that is due to his expertise and making sure you spent the money wisely and got the best deals and really used your VFX for the greatest effect.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So, this film proved to be quite a success with audiences, and there's a sequel coming up as well. Why do you think it appealed to people so much?
Well, I do think, again, it was so different than what people are used to seeing in superhero movies. It wasn't really even a superhero movie. It was an anti-hero movie, and it wasn't even it was a romantic comedy. It was a love story. We joked, in the marketing that this was, like The Notebook, and it was a love story, and we were trying to fool the women and to bring their boyfriends to bring their girlfriends. But it really, that's what the movie was. It was this touching love story. It was the story of this underdog. Having a superhero swear, it's like people just weren't used to seeing anything like this. And I think audiences really embrace that in a world where there's so much of the same out there, right?
I also feel like Deadpool passes the hangout test. We always apply, each one of our characters, we apply the hangout test to them, which is basically, would you want to hang out with this person? Good or evil? Like, are they interesting? Or would they be someone you'd like to spend a couple hours with? And Deadpool is so relatable. He's so flawed. He's so funny. He's so ridiculous, and
he's an underdog.
Yeah, and he is an underdog, and he's like immature, and he's a rule breaker, and he is a character. I mean, a character in the sense of just one of those larger than life people. And I think people and when they watched the marketing, thought, I want to go spend a couple hours with this lunatic, and that really helped us.
Yeah.
Well, thank you both so much, and congratulations on the film. And thank you for taking the time to talk with me.
We appreciate it, Zach.
Appreciate it.
All right.
You're welcome.
Take care.